What's going on, guys? Stefan, S&E's Garage. Today we're here with the 2009 Accord, and we went ahead and got that original equipment Honda starter. We got Emily over there with our friend Mike, different Mike, not the owner of this car, and we're going to go ahead and start doing this starter. So the first thing we're going to do is pull these two 10mm bolts, and we're also going to disconnect our negative battery terminal. That way we have the battery disconnected. We're going to get that shield out. All right, guys, so next we're going to remove this air dam. There's two clips behind here. I've already taken them off, so we're just going to get this out of our way. We got our battery disconnected, that shield off. Now we're going to go ahead and take this intake tube off and just kind of set it aside. This does have coolant lines running through it right here into the throttle body, so we want to leave this in the car so we don't have to drain the coolant. And then we're going to take our four 12mm bolts out of the throttle body and move it out of the way as well. Alright, guys, so we got all the bolts for our throttle body out. The throttle body's just kind of hanging out here. Like I said, it has coolant lines running through it, so we don't want to have to drain the coolant. Now we're just going to go through and start disconnecting this wire harness here so we can flop it up over the engine. And we're also going to take these two coolant hoses, or not coolant hoses, sorry, these two vacuum hoses off and move them out of the way so when we pull the intake manifold, they're not still connected and tying us up. Alright, guys, harness is out of the way. Two hoses here are connected. Now we're going to go ahead and pull all of our intake manifold bolts. You're going to have one here, two here, one here, one here. There's one hidden down here under the throttle body that you can kind of see the head of. And then there's a 12mm bracket down there on the engine block that we have to get off. There's a bolt for that. I like to remove it at the engine block because it's easier to get to than the two rusty ones here on the manifold. So we're just going to do it that way, get this whole intake out of our way. One thing that I do here is I unbolt the 10mm bolt for this vacuum switching valve and unplug it, and I leave this all connected. That way it's less things that you have to remember how they're routed. So we're just going to unplug this, move it out of the way, and then we can pull that 10mm out and pull these two hoses out of their holders so we can get to that bolt better. Guys, we got the intake plenum off, all our bolts out. Here is our new bad starter. So you're going to pull this little rubber grommet off. There's a 12mm under there you have to get off. And we're going to unplug this like so. And then we can go ahead and get our starter bolts out. This one here is going to be a 17. This one here is going to be a 14. And yeah, so let's get it out. Inspect the flywheel, make sure everything's okay there, and get the new starter in. Alright, guys, old starter's out. So what we're going to do now is we're basically going to spin this engine around by hand and just inspect the teeth on the flywheel or the flex plate, whatever you want to call it. One note here is basically whatever side your crank pulley's on, your engine is going to spin in the direction that the tires would spin with the car going forward. So this car is going to spin towards the front, so clockwise. So we're going to spin this engine clockwise and just inspect the teeth on the flywheel, make sure everything's okay. Alright, guys, so we spun this engine by hand. You see my ratchet there. And all these teeth on this flywheel, flex plate, torque converter, whatever you want to call it, are okay. So we're going to go ahead and install our new starter and, you know, do everything in the reverse order. Mike, give it a rev! Alright, guys, our new OEM Honda starter is installed. We have our 12mm hot wire bolted on. We have our solenoid wire clipped in. We replugged in our oil pressure switch, and we have everything routed correctly the way it's supposed to go. So now the only thing I did is I went ahead and I wiped off some of the grime and dirt off of this, I guess you'd call this the lower intake manifold. This is, you know, it's not quite the cylinder head. It looks like that bolts onto the head, but that's, you know, nice and clean. These rubber O-rings are reusable, you know, as long as they're not cracked, broken, anything like that. So we're just going to go ahead, wipe this down, then we're going to slide our intake back on, put all of our intake bolts back in, and then we're going to move over to the throttle body and the air tube. Alright, guys, our intake's back on. All of our bolts are tightened down for the intake. Throttle body's back on. All of our bolts are tightened down for that. We're going to go ahead and reinstall this vacuum switching valve here. We're going to reconnect our two vacuum hoses, and we're going to go ahead and reroute our air snorkel, get everything set up there. And then we just have some beauty covers and air cleaner assemblies to put back in. And we can go ahead, reconnect the battery, and let her rip. So let's go. All right, vacuum switching valves right here, back in place. We got our 2 vacuum lines reconnected, clamped. We got our air snorkel on and clamped, and we got our wire harness here routed down to where it goes. So now we can go ahead and throw the beauty cover on and the snorkel. All right, now we're going to reconnect our battery, clean up some of our tools that are in the cowl, and we're going to try to start it. All right, guys, she's all back together. Let's go ahead and give it its maiden start. I have not tried to start it yet. This is not something I scripted, so let's hope to God this thing starts. Oh yeah, and just like that, you put a starter in your 2009 Honda Accord. You saved yourself a ton of labor, and you kept yourself on the road in a perfectly good car. These Hondas are great. I love them. Hondas, Toyotas, it's all I drive. It's all I recommend my friends to drive. So please like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next time.